Hi, welcome to the Why It Matters series. I'm Alicia Merton.
And I'm Mary Morgan.
And we're going to talk to you today about phonemic awareness.
Okay, so we chose this topic because phonemic awareness is such an important early literacy skill that is also a predictor of students' reading success, especially at the very beginning stages. And a lot of people aren't really sure what it is. So we want to give you some background, and I'll let you know right now that we do have a product in our store on our website that gives more information about all of the topics we're going to cover. All right, so what is it? First of all, what is phonemic awareness? That's what a lot of people want to know. So phonemic awareness is really about sounds. Phonemic awareness, if a student has that, then they're able to hear, identify, move, and change sounds in spoken words. And it's important to remember that we're talking about sounds. We're not talking about looking at letters, although a little bit later you can mix letters with sounds. They can overlap. But if we're just talking about phonemic awareness, which we are right now, we're strictly talking about sounds. It is usually taught in kindergarten and at the beginning of first grade. Also preschool starts to work on phonemic awareness. Families work on it whenever they sing songs or play word games when they're in the car, things like that, all build phonemic awareness. So kids are learning it a lot when they're small and they're listening to spoken sounds. Some kids do need additional time or a strengthened focus so that they can learn about the spoken sounds in a way that they can use it in reading and writing. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. So Alicia and I meet young readers or even up to middle school age learners who still have some uncertainties in some areas of phonemic awareness. So it's not something that never needs instruction past the early grades, but it is really important that it be addressed. Okay, so why is it important? I already mentioned a little bit about why it's important. For one thing, it's a really strong predictor of reading success for early learners. And it helps kids get ready. It helps them prepare to do all the tasks that they need to do as they read and write. If they don't have phonemic awareness, if their phonemic awareness is weak or they have gaps in it, then they might struggle to blend sounds together when they're trying to sound out or decode a word. You may have heard a kid do that before. Or they may have a lot of trouble writing a word down sound by sound or figuring out, what is that sound and how does it match with a letter. So that comes a little bit later. But those are some of the signs that we see sometimes that tell us we need to think about that. Also, if you joined us for our sight word session, we talked about how phonemic awareness is a required skill. It's an important and necessary skill for kids to be able to learn sight words efficiently and effectively, because most sight words are decodable for the most part. So when kids don't have that ability, it can make it a lot harder for them to learn sight words. Also, just to let you know, Alicia and I do administer reading assessments and diagnostics, and we create learning plans for young readers and writers, and we almost always give a phonemic awareness assessment. And I think it's safe to say, Alicia, that if someone comes to us and they're concerned about their reader, that there's probably going to be something we'll find that needs to be addressed in the area of phonemic awareness. Would you say that's accurate?
I would say, and I think people just don't know that there is such a strong, like you said, there's a strong correlation between decoding and writing and spelling and strong phonemic awareness background. And so that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this this presentation and kind of talk about it, because there is such a strong correlation. And the students we work with have a lot of issues in writing, or their reading may be strong, but they over rely on certain strategies and their decoding is not. And we know that that can affect comprehension. And we see that a lot as well.
Sometimes kids will be okay seemingly for a while in school too. I've seen this catch up with kids in 3rd grade and 4th grade. If they have some phonemic awareness knowledge, but not enough, then they're struggling suddenly, seemingly, to read more complex text as they get older. And it might be because they have some missing parts and pieces. The good thing about phonemic awareness is that it's a conscribed skill. So once you know it strongly, you know it. You don't have to worry about, it's not something you keep on learning, like
Right.
vocabulary. You know, you're going to learn it all the time. So it is manageable to master it.
Right. And if you're not sure what that looks like, whether your reader has strong phonemic awareness or not, some of the things that they should be able to do are manipulate sounds. So, for example, if you ask them, what is the first sound in the word cat? And they cannot produce that k sound, then, okay, they may need some help with phonemic awareness. So it's the first sounds, the last sounds, middle sounds are particularly tricky for students if they have not been explicitly taught those sounds and how to manipulate. And I want to reiterate, Mary said again, we're just talking about sounds, they're not yet hooked to the symbol of a letter yet. So it's just, can you identify that middle sound or that beginning, and can you change it? You know, can you change those beginning sounds to make a new word orally? Can they hear it? And I think that if the answer is no, then that may be an indication that your reader needs a little bit of work in the area of phonemic awareness. If they're not able to take separate sounds and blend them together to tell you the word, or take a word and tell you and separate sounds and tell you how many sounds, then that may be that's just a quick kind of like assessment you can do at home to see, okay, you might need a little bit of sound work here. Mm-hmm. And it comes through when they're writing words, new words, when they're trying to write, or even a really popular strategy of sound it out can be particularly difficult for a reader that does not have strong phonemic awareness skills already in place.
And I have to mention too about all the kids who are learning English. I know their parents are also, looking for strategies and ways to help their kids, that the learning of sounds does transfer from one language to another, but those skills need to be taught probably, it could be any grade. It just depends on when the student is at that early emergent level of learning. So it could be any grade that they need some support with phonemic awareness.
And we've kind of seen some issues could be time. Maybe they have not had enough instruction or time to practice those skills before they are expected to apply them in a text. And also that the pronunciation of the sounds has maybe been taught incorrectly. There are correct ways to pronounce letters without a vowel sound at the end. And we, like Mary mentioned, we have created a module for parents, educators, anyone who's interested. It's for sale in our store, and we have a link and a video in there for you, so that you can hear actually how letters should be pronounced and said. And we've actually seen students write the way they are pronouncing the letter. And for example, if someone hears an A or a U at the end of a D sound, they will write DU or DA when they're simply trying to make that D sound by itself, and because it's been taught incorrectly. Mm-hmm. And it could be the dialect or where you live. I know I have that Southern twang sometimes, but it's really important to teach and pronounce those letters correctly. It really can affect your reader and writer in a negative way.
Yes. It's funny that you said that, because I have a student who, she and I talk about your Southern Kentucky's coming out, because she'll be trying to write the word then, and she writes it then, or when is when. And I've seen her mix those vowels up because of how she speaks. So last time we did it, she said, that's the one where my Kentucky gets me, isn't it? I said, yes. And then she got it correct. So, yes, it could be dialect for sure, but you can learn that there's a different way to say it.
Definitely. And some of the ways you may notice your reader responding, readers and writers tend to stay where they feel safe, right? Where they feel successful. So they usually rely on the sounds they know well when they read, write, or spell. So taking risk without strong sound awareness is typically not something a reader or a writer is going to do. They stay in that safe zone. Vowel sounds, like Mary just gave a perfect example, can be particularly tricky if they have not been explicitly taught solid sound awareness and are able to kind of play with those sounds and manipulate those in different words. You may see that. Decoding definitely will be an issue. They may over rely on certain strategies, such as just looking at the picture or making an attempt from letters they know, because they don't really have a way to attack that word when they read it or when they're writing a new word. And then frustration ensues where they don't want to try, they don't want to take that risk. And you might notice early readers especially will tend to get, if you know anything about reading levels, they'll tend to get stuck in the emergent stage of reading, where texts tend to be pretty predictable and have heavy picture support. There's not a lot of decoding opportunities in those early levels, so therefore they don't have to. And then when they jump from the emergent to the early stage, some readers tend to get stuck and they really do not have enough tools to navigate through those texts. So those are some just red flags that kind of help you know, okay, maybe this is a sound issue, which I don't think is that common. We tend to think it's maybe a comprehension, or they can't read, or they don't know their sight words. Phonemic awareness, I feel like, tends to be maybe overlooked a little bit due to time and curriculum and mandates.
And expectations. So, I think it's assumed that it's going to be a preschool experience too now, and it's, for a lot of kids, it's not.
It's not.
So and it is in the curriculum. So it is something we should be thinking about for sure.
And it's something that really does need to be secure before moving on.
Especially that segmenting and blending. And those are the some of the highest phonemic awareness skills there are, segmenting the word and blending the word. And if they can't do those things, then they have a hard time attacking something that they don't know as they write or read.
Right.
All right, so we are telling you some of the things we see often and questions that we get about it. We have parents and caregivers who say, why is this child still not spelling these words easily? Or these are the things that we notice. So what we want to do now is tell you some of the things we do about it. Where do we go from there? So we know that kids respond to the instruction that they're given based on their strengths. And so what do we do to respond to them and what their needs are? So first of all, where do you start? And that's a question you just said today, Alicia. Everyone wants to know that. Where do you start? And you really start with those real early skills with rhyming and clapping syllables and things like that. But we're talking about getting down to the letter sound in words, those individual letter sounds, which are called phonemes. And that's why it has that name, phonemic awareness. So where do you start? Well, we like to start with the sounds that the kids will be experiencing most often in spoken and written words. And for example, a lot of times teachers will start with the letters B, the sounds of B. See, I'm doing it. B, not B, and S, because those 4 sounds, which are later represented by letters, are so common. And Alicia and I were looking at a book today that was saying those sounds are in the high 90% in the number of times that they come up in spoken and written language. So there are some sequences that you can use so that you support your learner with learning the things that he or she will see the most first, so they can get a lot of confidence. And we have more about that in our PowerPoint that we were talking about.
So what you're saying is letter sound learning is not random.
Well, it can be, but it's not very effective.
But it shouldn't be.
Right. And that being said, also starting with the sound of A and then B and then C and then D and so on, that's not how kids will encounter those sounds when they listen to words and when they listen to poems, songs, stories, all the things you're hearing. So we don't advocate that you go in alphabetical order when you're teaching sounds.
I think the important, going back to one of the barriers of phonemic awareness was time. That was brought up earlier. So I'm thinking if you know where to begin, that's going to save you some time and maybe some frustration, because if they're naturally hearing those sounds and that's the continuum that they learn, then that information's important. And like you said, it shouldn't go in the sequence of the alphabet.
Right. And we're going to be learning some more about, well, how do you teach those sounds? Let's say you are starting with B, M, R, and S sounds. Then what do you do? And Alicia's going to talk about that in a second, and I will talk about that as well.
So one of the first activities you can do is really simple. It's purely oral. No materials needed. You could, whether you're focusing on a beginning, middle, or ending sound, you could simply give your reader 3 words, say 3 words, such as bike, ball, or car, and then have them tell you which one does not belong. Well, of course, it would be car, because the other 2 begin with the first sound of B. You can do that with ending sounds and also middle sounds as well. So you're just having them really listen, which sounds simple. The task is simplistic, but asking a child to do that when they're learning phonemic awareness is actually pretty tough. So games like that can be done anywhere in the car. You don't need any materials, and it's simply oral. So that's a great listening comprehension activity too, as well as strengthening their phonemic awareness. We also have Alconin boxes that each box represents a sound. And this is where students or readers can use either counters or pennies. And you have a box for each sound. So if the word is cat, they make each sound k, at, and then they simply push up the penny or the counter as they say it, and then go back from left to right and pull that word together quickly. At, cat. We may have a picture of a cat. You have them say the word, push up the individual sounds, and bring it back together.
Mm-hmm. And it's meant to show each sound being separate and then putting it together. For some kids, they need that visual, right?
Yes. Okay. And it helps them hear each individual sound in a word.
Okay, so another activity that I like to use is stretching words out. Some people call it rubber banding, or the activity that I included in our PowerPoint is called snail talk. So guess that word. So basically, it's really important to remember that for a lot of kids, instead of saying, what's the word? They might need to hear it, sun. It sounds more like a word that way. So when you stretch it out slowly and you really make those letter sounds, pull them out as long as you can, then for a lot of kids, that's more similar to what it sounds like when they're trying to figure out a word. If you see a kid trying to decode a word, or they can just recognize it as a word. They can hear it, that's sun instead of some kids will get that right away, and some kids will look at you and say, Sutton. That's what you said. So you've had that happen, I'm sure. I've had that happen quite a few times. So that's something else you can do, is say, guess my word, and say, stretch the sounds out. And some sounds stretch out more easily. So like S, the U, and the N, I chose on purpose because they can all really be stretched out. But you could do the same thing with a word like bat, at, like that. And the kids then can put it together and say it fast.
I think it's so important to do that too, because if they hear an extra phoneme or an extra sound somewhere in that word, when they go to write, that's going to show up in their writing.
Yeah.
So it does affect spelling as well. So I'm just trying to reiterate how important phonemic awareness really is to later reading and writing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we have more strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would like those, they're in our store, Merton & Morgan Consulting.com. It's on the products page. I want to tell you about a read aloud. It's called Runny Babbitt. It's by Shel Silverstein, and it's a collection of poems where he takes that initial sound, initial letter, and switches it around. It's kind of difficult to read, actually, but children love it. There's a picture of it on our website. If you go to mertonmorganconsulting.com under Why It Matters, we have the last 3 series, sight words, letter formation, and now phonemic awareness, and all the resources and a link to the products. We have a product for sight words as well, for parents that want to learn more, or educators that want to learn more, or just the public in general, if you're interested in this topic. And reach out to us if you have a reader or a writer who needs support and help. That's what we do. And
yes, we're happy to talk to you, give assessments, and then just talk you through what you could do with your reader too. It could just be something you're noticing that you want to take a look at. So,
all right. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. We'll see you again.